Hey everybody, welcome back to the Running Through It podcast YouTube page. My name is Justin Horniker, and I want to dive into the big debate in the long distance running world, track field world, athletics world, whatever you want to call us right now, is surrounding the Nike Next Percent, the whatever Eliud Kipchoge is running, the 6%, any sort of carbon fiber plate shoes. So we're talking my New Balance 5280s, we're talking that shoe that Jared Ward ran in that all the Saucony athletes are running in. We're talking about the Hoka Carbon X and Carbon Rocket. Should these shoes be banned? That's kind of the prevailing question. And I think there's a lot of different avenues to explore this with, because it's not necessarily, should we ban these shoes? They're making everybody faster. It's that, are these shoes giving, one, an unfair advantage to certain sponsored athletes based off of who you signed with as a pro, to the point where we could see Olympic spots in Tokyo next year being decided by the contract that you signed. Being that if Nike's shoe really is that much better than, say, the Carbon Rocket, which right now it seems that way. But the other thing is that if we're looking at the athletes that Nike has sponsored, so the Eliud Kipchoge versus, say, Ben Bruce of Hoka or Scott Fauble of Hoka, right? That's not really even playing ground, because running barefoot, Eliud Kipchoge is going to beat Scott Fauble every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So it's hard to say. You also look at Chicago this past week, and you have, one, the Paul Radcliffe's world record being shattered, a record that we thought was probably untouchable for a while, beaten by a lot, because Bridget Kosgei ran in the next percents and is just really fit as a 25-year-old. Natural progression on top of a shoe that potentially makes you a minute faster over the course of a marathon if you haven't worn them before. Then you also have 10 Americans breaking 2:12 for the first time after 5 Americans had done so in the past decade. So you're looking at a lot of things that are telling you, okay, are we just getting fitter? Are training methods just getting that much better? Or does that have something to do with the shoes? Is this an unfair advantage? Is there something in the shoes that's propelling people faster? So I don't want to get into the science as much here, because you can go a lot of places to find that. I haven't researched on it, so I'm not as comfortable. I will say that a lot of people are reading a lot too much into the carbon fiber plate being a spring necessarily, and a lot of the energy return aspect of it comes from the foam. And that foam being soft and spongy, if you think of a really soft foam, you're going to have some instability there. That instability leads to loss in energy, loss in economy. If you think running economy, running efficiency, that's what we're looking for. Think of boost foam, right? It's that nice, resilient foam. They put that torsion in the middle of it, so that keeps it a little bit stiffer, so that when you put your foot down, because that foam is so soft and resilient, but it has that torsion system, it's kind of harvesting some of that energy and pushing it forward instead of losing it in the foam because of the instability. Think of the carbon fiber plate as being a similar thing. It's just more of a stiff material. It does have some springiness to it, so don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that. But because that carbon fiber plate is there, what it is doing is keeping your fascia nice and stable so that it can spring forward, and it's not losing any of that energy that it has stored. So if you think of your foot as a spring, right? The carbon fiber isn't in the spring, it's just letting your foot act as a spring even more. So clear up that misconception that a carbon fiber is like breaking it in half and springing you forward. I did share a Twitter video last year that went viral. Jumping into this because I wrote an article late last week, self-plug, play the trumpets, what have you, where I asked a couple industry professionals what their thoughts were. If you listen to, people have been talking about this between Steve Magnus and Jonathan Marcus on the Magnus and Marcus podcast. The Let's Run guys tackled it. Basically, everyone who covers the sport has talked about it. But I wanted to kind of give more of a well-balanced take. Because honestly, I can see both sides. I can see why people maybe want these shoes banned. I can see why maybe we don't ban them, but we get some legislation across to where we know where that line is. And I think it's always good to know what the rules are, as opposed to the Wild Wild West, where, you know, who knows what's going to happen. Then you also have the people that want the Wild Wild West, that want the ingenuity of shoe companies to lead to revolutions like we're seeing right now. So do we want to stifle that in terms of putting rules in place that the athletes are the showcase, not the shoes, or do we want to see what happens when everything lets loose? So I want to read a little bit of this article because I just kind of lay the groundwork. You can kind of see in the past video, a couple videos down, where I posted the stuff in my podcast. I tell a story in that podcast about how the Elliott's run was gravitational, right? I had friends that are not running fans that were just glued to that broadcast. However, it's a little bit concerning to those that follow the sport. So it casts a bit of a shadow over this weekend. We can accept that footwear technology and the upgraded Next Percent shoes Eliud Kipchoge is wearing could help this cause. But there's also an array of world-class runners pacing him on top of a laser-equipped pace car in perfect running conditions, all perfect cocktail for a race that no one will forget. And then Sunday happened. Bridget Kosgei broke Paul Radcliffe's long-standing world record in her first time racing in the Nike Next Percent shoes, along with 10 American men breaking 2:12 for the first time in history. Sure, conditions were great, but there's no denying that better shoe technology across the board is drastically increasing fitness gains while drastically bringing down the average elite marathon time below anything we've ever seen before. And I think it's fair to say that the shoes have a lot to do with it versus everyone else just being that much more fit. Kind of moving on. I asked some people what they had to think, some experts. So Dennis Barker, coach, rider, he was coach of Team USA in Minnesota once upon a time, is now just very active in the St. Paul, Minneapolis community. I asked him what he had to say. He said, all shoes are performance enhancing in that one can run faster in a marathon on pavement with shoes than barefoot. The added cushioning reduces foot and leg trauma, so its primary purpose is safety and injury prevention, both of which are good and use available technology for any sport. But there is a point at which the shoe is no longer providing merely injury prevention, but additional performance enhancement. So there needs to be standards to divine the line between the two, such as design, materials, responsiveness, and thickness of the sole. For example, a shoe designed with a carbon plate within an ultra-thick outer sole that acts as a spring is not required for injury prevention. The design, materials, responsiveness, and thickness of the sole all function as additional performance enhancements, so it crosses the line and would not be allowed. Setting standards would be a way to ensure that a close race is decided by the athletes, not the shoe. So I asked him, how would you go about deciding these guidelines? He said, don't think you can leave it to the shoe companies. The hard part isn't the testing or compliance, but the stakeholders agreeing on what the standards should be. So then I asked David Monti, editor and founder of Race Results Weekly, and he said, well, I don't have any opinion on any particular shoe. I do think that the IAAF, or World Athletics Association, should come out with equipment guidelines for running shoes used in races, similar to technical specs required for throwing implements. These guidelines should be based on good science and research and support the concept of fair play. And I think that's when I get into Jonathan Gault. So next I'm going to go into what Jonathan Gault had to say, and then I want to kind of give my thoughts on the subject. So Jonathan Gault, staff writer at Let's Run, said, the way I see it, there are a few issues. One, the IAAF does currently have a rule regarding footwear, Rule 143.2, but it's vague, and the IAAF doesn't seem interested in clarifying or enforcing it. And that's an issue we've had with multiple things with the IAAF. Issue 2 is it's clear at this point that vapor flies provide a significant advantage compared to marathon racing flats or even the recent past. And if that is the case, it will dictate the outcome of races if it hasn't already, and no one, perhaps, save for Nike execs, wants to see footwear determining the outcome. That's where I said, it's not, the U.S. shouldn't lose out on a medal, or say any country shouldn't lose out on a medal, because Adidas doesn't know how to put a carbon fiber plate into a shoe. Simple as that, in my mind. Clearly, some sort of regulation is needed to prevent this. Issue 3, if you're going to draw a line on footwear, where and how do you draw it? I have sympathy for the IAAF because it's really tough to do. Let's say you want to ban the vapor flies. How would you do it? We know the vapor flies provide an advantage, but why specifically? Is it the carbon fiber plate? Is it the stiffness of the shoe? Is it the height of the composition of the midsole? The IAAF has to be thoughtful and precise about what exactly they would outlaw and how they would do it. I don't think enough about the science behind the shoes to know where that line should be drawn. My boss, Robert Johnson, wrote a story about the issue when Sifan Hassan broke the mile world record in what appeared to be a pair of prototype Nike spikes. He wrote the IAAF about them, and the following part of the IAAF's response underscores the fundamental challenge. IAAF said, the challenge for the IAAF is to find the right balance in the technical rules between encouraging development and the use of new technologies in athletics, and the preservation of the fundamental characteristics of the sport. Accessibility, universality, fairness, I can't put much better. and you don't want to discourage innovation. But if innovation is so great that it starts affecting the outcome of races, that is a problem. And I think that's where I stand as well. It's that we want to have innovation. We want brands to be brands and to be able to keep pushing the sport forward. However, if that means that one athlete has a competitive advantage because of the brand he signed up, and that shouldn't be allowed. And I think a lot of people are going to see that because it's Nike, because a lot of people, myself included, have a little bit of a bias towards things that Nike does. That if this was, say, Saucony, if Eliud Kipchoge was a Saucony runner, if Bridget Kosgei was a Saucony runner, would there be this much backlash? And honestly, that's so hard to answer because I think there would be. But the fact that Nike sponsors a lot of the top athletes and has such a foothold in the sport, that people on our end are going to have this backlash. But what do you guys think? Where do you stand on this debate? Do you want more legislation, less legislation? Do you want kind of everyone to have free reign, let the market decide? Let me know down in the comments what you would do. To me, I just want something on the books by the time Tokyo comes around. I don't want this to be like the swimsuits where, if you're familiar with swimming, they had these really buoyant swimsuits and eventually they had to retroactively ban them. I don't want that situation. I don't want us to be asking what if. I want the legislation to be in place, spend the time leading up to Tokyo, have this legislation in place so that we can work with it. That's a tough ask. IAAF has a lot on their plate here, but hopefully that puts us in a good direction to where it's not all we're talking about and we can actually focus on the athletes and focus on the performances. But anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. If you like this video, if you like what I have to say, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe for more because I love you and I love seeing you around. Anyway, happy running. We'll talk soon.